Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Shushak, and I am the grateful pastor here at Edges today. I was grateful for the conversation I just heard at a table I moved so you wouldn't know who it was several times during these songs. I was sitting with two guys. One guy says to the other, "You know, we really should try to come at 8:30. The room's kind of full." To which the other guy replied, "Do you have any idea how hard of a time we had getting here at 10:30? So come when you want, that's all I'll say. Come whenever you can get here. That's the best idea. I'm grateful. I said I'm the grateful pastor here at Edges, and I come every week. That song, "I'll go where you will lead me, Lord," I would never do that by myself. So I just come because worship helps orient me and us together. So I'm glad that you've all chosen to be here today as well. I wonder if anyone in the room knows the saying, "Watch where you're going." Have any of you heard that before? Oh, see, in first service, nobody had heard of this before. It made me think it was just Texas colloquial talk. But some of you aren't from Texas, so maybe it isn't. This was a common phrase in my growing up. I learned to ski as a tiny little girl, like not long, it seemed to me, after I learned to walk. So my center of gravity was very low. This is a good time, by the way, to learn to snow ski when it won't be far for you to fall. I could literally make that pizza, the snowplow with my skis, in between my dad's legs. So he would snowplow and I would snowplow in between his legs, and I would hold on around his thighs. Some of you have seen this before. And inevitably, after a little while, I would let go and I would start to go down the hill. And he would yell at me, "Watch where you're going." Now, even as a little girl, I remember thinking that was a stupid thing to say. If I hadn't already been so schooled in Southern charm and etiquette, I would have said, "I am, fool. Do you think I'd be watching where I'm not going?" This same story played out over and over in our family, mostly with vehicular types of tasks, like when I learned to drive. But in time, I learned to think of this as my dad's way of saying, "Be careful, Kelly. Pay attention." Even after I learned the value of it, I never, ever thought of "watch where you're going" as the pearl of life wisdom that it actually is. Until our daughter, Ivy Ann, started riding a horse. Now, I would marvel as Ivy Ann's trainers would instruct her to look in the direction she wanted to go, telling her that her horse would soon follow. As I watched, I could see her learn to turn her head toward a jump on the other side of the arena, and then like magic, her horse would respond and just follow the lead of her looking. Watch where you're going. Whatever you're focused on, whatever direction you're looking, that's where you will wind up. So this morning, I hope to share with you some pieces of a vision for Edges, a direction that we're going to be looking this whole year. This is a direction that our leadership teams here have chosen with confidence for one reason and one reason only. We know it's where God wants us to wind up. We know this because it's one of those big, strong threads in the story of God and people that we find in the Bible. Over and over again, God encourages God's people, focus this way. Watch where you're going. So the vision that I'm about to talk about for this year, since it's from God, it's the kind of thing that could be clarifying or helpful for any individual who just happened to walk into the room today. If it's God's vision, it's always God's vision for all people. And it's for the Edges community as a whole, something we're going to practice doing together this year. While there are tons of Bible passages that you could just plop down in and find this vision, we've chosen just one really clear verse that we hope will help us watch where God wants us to go. The verse comes from Philippians chapter 2, verse 4. And today I'll be reading from the New Living Translation, which is not one we normally use, but it has some salient wording in it that I want us to claim. The passage reads like this: Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. So we've chosen this year's theme from this verse, mostly because it just seems like now is the right time. Today is September 9th. September 9th is Edge's anniversary. This year we are 6 years old. For more than half a decade, Edge's has been riveted on building community. Anybody who's been here very long knows that. It's no surprise to any of us. We've been focused on creating kind of a minimalist, straightforward, black and white, no capital letters, open environment where all people can access relationship through conversations. Conversations with each other and conversations with God. We've been practicing that for 6 years. Even our name, Edges, is a statement about where God meets us, at the edges of things, offering friendship. 6 years ago, we decided to work hard at community first because it seemed like what God would do first. Meet people's most basic needs for safety and for belonging. So we've just tried to create a space where no matter who walks in that door on any Sunday morning, they would find a welcome. A place that might say, this is a place where you could find hope or bring hope, where you could heal or help heal. Because we know that community is who God is, community will always be at the front of what we do, always. A new vision's not going to change that. But now it feels like we are ready to look out not only for our own interests, but to grow a focused vision that includes but won't be limited to ourselves. What would it mean for us as a church community, for us as people to look beyond our own edges, to take an interest in others, to take on the interests of others, to take the hopes and pains and necessities and joys of others as our own? Of course, we've done some of this over the past 6 years. But what if we turned our whole church body in a direction that would probably take us well beyond our edges? So this year, we're going to see what happens if we just chisel our focus. We're going to see what happens when we look out over and over again in ways that maybe many of us haven't tried before, in ways that some of us might never try on our own. Now, Ivy Ann's trainer, her horse trainer, has to tell her even now, 7, 8 years later, to look out, to look where she wants to go. Why? Because her impulse is to look down. Her impulse is to focus on herself or to focus on what's right in front of her. This morning, before we go any further, I have a confession. It's exactly the same with me, as a person and even as your pastor. My impulse is actually not to look out. My impulse is to look down, to focus on what's right in front of me, to look at what's right in front of us, to make sure I'm doing my very best at what I already know how to do. You see, I love community. I'm a natural at having and building conversation. This has been easy for me. I'm always thinking about how to make the next people feel comfortable in the conversation. I'm the one always thinking about how to stay open to the inclusion of more. This is my easy beating heart. And it may be why this is a direction that God has made such a huge home in here. People need community. But looking out beyond edges, this makes me think about how a church could focus on things beyond us, how we could take new risks with different people because we know Jesus asks us to go. Last week, we read the biblical text from the book of Acts in chapter 1, where Jesus tells his friends to go and be witnesses. Do you remember the text? You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and unto the ends of the earth. Jesus tells his friends to go and be witnesses outside, beyond themselves, to the ends of the earth. To be a witness, to look out for Jesus, is to go with hope and trust and participation and even partnership in ever-expanding circles, because God is always making home beyond us. What if our job as witnesses is not to take Jesus to people, but to be a witness, to name and to get all mixed up in the holy that's already there? Now, I put those last two sentences on the screen because I think they seem unruly. And I'd like to ask you how that thought makes you feel. Let me just read the final sentence one time. Our job as witnesses is not to take Jesus to people. It is to be a witness, to name and to get all mixed up in the holy that's already there. How does that make you feel? That, my friends, is our first call-out question. Go ahead. Anyone? I'm going to get a pen while you think so I can write down your forthcoming responses. Okay, scared. What else? To have an awareness, like you'd need an awareness, okay? Humble. Relieved, okay? Encouraged. Curious. Open. Invited. Hopeful. Purposeful. I think you have a purpose. Action-oriented. Sorry? How? How are we going to do that? A whirlwind? Yeah, like a whirlwind. Insufficient. It's not what they taught me in Sunday school. Not Sunday school approved. Okay? Right. Exactly. To me, the thought feels huge and also unspecified, like how. It makes me both curious, to use one of your words, and skeptical. I feel ready to make a difference, purposeful, and terrified I'll have to be an activist, action-oriented. In this way, looking out seems truly complicated and gnarly and frankly kind of hard to sell. It makes me worry that I'm not sure it's in my nature. But I know if it's God's dream, it is at least my faintly beating heart if I'll be still enough to listen. And it's yours too. In order to really look out, in order to see what needs to be seen in Blacksburg and in all the spheres where we, the particular people in this community, I want to push pause there for just a moment and let you know that we believe here that every time God sends someone new into this community, it's because God wants to do something unique because that one is here. That's why it's so important. Everyone who comes, what are your connections? What are your places and spheres of influence? Where are you already seeing God? To see what needs to be seen in Blacksburg and in all the spheres where we, the particular people in this community, have proximity to openings where God is saying, could I get a witness? Will you be my partners? To see that, we will need each other's help. We, the particular people in this community, will need to invite each other directly to watch where we're going. Now, I have a few ideas about that. Our worship planners have a few ideas about that. Our leadership teams have a few ideas about that, but we don't have nearly all of them. It'll take all of us to know the stuff that's already right outside our window that seem like jackpot ways to take an interest in others, to take on the interest of others. Idea 1. Many of you are already involved with our partner school down the street. It's about 2 football fields away, called Harding Avenue Elementary. For several years now, some of us have been showing up to be a lunch buddy to some kid who has helped us to understand love more directly. That's what it is. We just show up and be part of the love that's in motion. So this is my 4th year with the same buddy. This little guy, along with God, and perhaps only God and my little buddy, loves cockroaches. Four years now. I would think that even if you did once love, it would be a fading interest, don't you think? It's not. 4 years now. Anyway, I saw him for the first time this past Wednesday. And he ran to me when he saw me. I wanted to believe he was just excited to see me. But he ran to me because he couldn't wait to tell me that this year we are old enough to do lunchtime recycle duty. Which means that we go through all the lunch trash and we reallocate the stuff that kids toss into the wrong bins. I've spent 4 years dodging ketchup and chocolate milk. And now this year, I'll get to swim in it. This kid has barely been alive a decade, and he knows what's saving his life these days. He knows that you have to care about creation enough to get a little dirty for it. So I got to thinking, surely Lunch Buddies isn't the only partnership our partner school could use. I bet if we asked them, I bet if we really focused, I bet if we really turned ourselves toward Harding Avenue this year, I wonder what possibilities we could see together. So this past week, I met with the principal, and I asked her how we could partner in whatever good that's already in motion there. Not what good we'd dream up for somebody else, but what good is already in motion that we could just be part of. And she had some ideas. And she said she needed to talk to the teachers about their ideas. And so I want you to know we're working to put some of those in motion, and you'll be hearing about them here. And I don't want you to be surprised when they seem kind of ordinary. because that's almost always how God shows up. Second, some of us know and have heard about a natural connection that we have that's a little further away, more like 20,000 football fields away. About the same time that we were dreaming with God about this Edges community, there were some other folks, including our own Chris and Tim Chittenden, who've been with us in this Edges community since the beginning, who were dreaming about a little school in the Dominican Republic called New Hope Girls. Chris and Tim met their daughter, our own Joanna Polanco, when she was just 5 years old and at that school. And she now lives here with us. Like us, New Hope Girls is at the evolutionary stage where they are looking out for partners. Soon you'll be hearing about some opportunities, including the possibility of being part of a hands-on team that will actually travel to the Dominican Republic this summer. Now, New Hope Girls is more than just a school for a couple dozen lucky little girls that they've plucked up. New Hope is trying to look out into its community. And as they've done that, they've found about 100 more girls. You see the number 98 on the screen there. That's the number of girls in community outreach that they're reaching out to when they look out beyond themselves. And those 100 girls live with way more baggage than hope. And they just need some buddies like us to show up in some real experiences where love is already breaking through, to be part of it with them. Again, we're not going to create something that's a project. We're going to participate in what's already happening there. And New Hope Girls has a facility that needs some workers. Do you see the number circled 5 there? That's how many work teams they had this past year. People who came to just do grunt work, the stuff that nobody else wants to do. And this year, they're inviting us to come and be part of that work. It'll be dirty work. I think it's just another bigger version of the recycling project my lunch buddy said was our job this year. And I think these are the kind of things that save lives. And you'll be hearing more about them in the coming days. And I don't want you to be surprised when it sounds kind of ordinary. Beyond these possibilities, you're going to see an emerging change in some of our spaces here. There's going to be a wall and gathering grounds where you can bring information about how folks can look out in our community, like newspaper articles or flyers or opportunities that you're involved with. And there's going to be a corner with quotes and some images that you can take or share with other people. Those will be some of the ways we'll try to keep it on the front burner. Next week, we're going to have some palpable reminders that you can take with you. And next week, we're going to also begin our first series of the year aimed at looking out. It'll be called Look Out, Here Come More Elephants in the Church. That rings a bell for some of you to the series that we did last year called Elephants in the Church. It's still our most watched series of all time at Edges. We talked about elephants that don't often make their way into the church, things like sexuality and suicide and money and sex and addiction. You could still watch those themes from last year, and you can join us as we look out for more uncomfortable but holy ways to look beyond ourselves. And they will be uncomfortable. Our first 2 weeks of that series, speaking of uncomfortable things to talk about in church, will be politics and then hell. You may think that's just one topic. I bet I'm going to get in trouble for that later. Week 3 will be determined by you. So be thinking about what you think we should talk about in church that never gets brought up and just sits there like an elephant in the room that God probably wants to do something about if a few people would just have some conversation about it. I know what God calls us to think about the topic of looking toward others. But as I was writing this sermon, it was only after I wrote those last 3 paragraphs, the practical paragraphs, that I could feel the why in God's dream. I could feel how looking out saves us from what my friend Francis calls navel gazing. I could feel how looking out keeps us from self-pity. I could feel how it prevents us from the addiction of selfish consumerism. I could feel how it moves a person out of his or her grief. I could feel how we can't possibly look out and also remain victims, because compassion is a power everybody is given. I could feel how looking out will make us wide-eyed, and being wide-eyed will make us open-handed, and being open-handed will make us open-hearted, and that leads to the kind of, I just couldn't help it, generosity that is true, not forced. Looking out places us in the middle of miracles we could never see if we were just looking down doing the same things we already know how to do and think. To look out is to sign on for new friendships and new understanding, the kind of understanding and friendship that comes from a 10-year-old. Somebody we might never have happened upon. And looking out may just be the one thing that could actually shift the dead-end direction it seems we're headed sometimes these days. It could transition the news. What if this is what it is to go to the far ends of the earth? I think we should find out. Let's look out. So let it be. Amen.